The human arrived at docking gate 7 with a duffel bag, a dented thermos, and 17 kilograms less equipment than the mission manifest had specified. I checked the manifest again. Then, I checked it a third time, because the second time I had been distracted by the fact that he was eating, standing in the pressurized gate corridor, surrounded by the noise and compressed smell of a transfer hub that processed 400,000 transits per cycle, casually consuming something from a small foil packet while his biometrics were being scanned. The scanner was slow. He didn't seem to care. He chewed. He looked out the viewport at the Veth corridor approach lane with the mild, unfocused expression of something that had not yet decided whether the universe was interesting. My name is Sovok Terran, Senior Field Attaché, Veth Border Authority, 3rd Tier. My job, for the next 6 days, was to escort one specialist-grade human operative named Reeves across the corridor, deliver him to Outpost Cabal 9, and return without incident. The file they gave me was 43 pages. I had read all of them. None of them explained the foil packet. Reeves, I said. My translator rendered it flat, as it always did with human surnames, no tonal inflection, no status marker, just the name hanging in the air like something dropped. He looked at me. Brown eyes. The kind of face that had been weathered past the point of looking young without quite arriving at looking old. A scar bisected his left eyebrow, and the eyebrow had grown back wrong on one side, slightly higher, which gave his face a permanent faint expression of skeptical inquiry that I would later learn was entirely accurate to his personality. "That's me," he said. "You are missing equipment," I said. Specifically, one pressurized environment suit rated for corridor conditions, one emergency beacon array, one "I've got a suit." He patted the duffel. "It's in there. The listed suit is a Mark 7 environmental, yeah, I swapped it out." He finished the foil packet, folded it twice with extraordinary neatness, and tucked it into a side pocket of the duffel. Mark 7 has a seal issue on the left wrist coupling. Lot of people don't know that. I've got a Mark 5 modified. It's fine. I stared at him. He looked back at me with the same mild, unhurried expression. The Veth corridor was not a place where equipment substitutions were filed under fine. The corridor was 6 light days of contested transit space where 3 territorial claims overlapped and 2 of them were currently in a state that my superiors had diplomatically categorized as suspended hostility, which was a phrase that translated, in practice, to actively hostile but not currently shooting. The atmosphere of Cabal 9 outpost was technically breathable for humans but sat at a pressure differential that required suit support for any duration beyond 4 hours. The transit itself crossed 2 debris fields from the partition engagements, navigable, but only if you were not worried about microsphere impacts on aging hull plating. The Mark 5 modified was not rated for microsphere. I noted all of this. In my log, which I dictated subvocally as a habit, my supervisor called it pathological, I called it professionally thorough. I noted, human operative Reeves, non-compliant with equipment manifest, apparently unbothered. Possible overconfidence. Possible ignorance. Possible third category not yet identified. The shuttle departs in 40 minutes, I said. Great. He shouldered the duffel. Is there somewhere I can get coffee on this station? There was not coffee on the station. There was a compressed nutrient dispensary near Gate 4 that produced something in a range of flavors that the nutrient chemists had apparently decided approximated coffee, based on, I suspected, a description of coffee provided by someone who had never tasted it. The result smelled of burnt grain and produced a dark liquid that clung to the inside of containers in a way that I found deeply unsettling. Reeves got 2 of them. He drank the first one while we walked to the shuttle bay. He did not make the face that most humans made when they encountered station-grade nutrient approximations. He drank it the way someone drinks something familiar, which meant either that his palate had been damaged beyond recovery, or that he had been in enough places like this that the drink had become normal. I had a brief, intrusive thought about what those places might have been like. I filed it under irrelevant to mission. The shuttle was a mid-range Veth Authority transit vessel, not combat-rated, not luxurious, built with the kind of functional specificity that communicated you will arrive, and that is all we are promising. It had 6 passenger restraint stations and a cargo hold that currently contained 3 sealed containers of geological survey equipment bound for Cabal 9, plus Reeves's duffel, which he had declined to stow and had instead wedged between his seat and the hull with the focused efficiency of someone who wanted it accessible. "Long trip," I said, settling into the restraint station across from him. My secondary eyes, the lateral pair, the ones I used for peripheral chemical sensing, noted the particular compound his shipsuit off-gassed when he moved. Old suit. Repaired multiple times. The patch material on the right shoulder was a different polymer than the original, and the collar seal had been rebonded at least twice. 6 days, he said. I've done longer. The corridor is not a standard transit lane. I read the briefing. The briefing is, I stopped. Considered. The briefing is a summary. It does not fully convey. He looked at me with the skeptical inquiry eyebrow. Convey what? I was trying to find a way to explain that the Veth corridor had a way of making even experienced transit officers feel like they were being watched by something large and patient and not particularly interested in their continued operation, but this was not information that appeared in the official briefing, and I was not certain it constituted a briefing-worthy fact. It was more of a sensation. An environmental quality. The electromagnetic profile of the corridor interferes with standard communication relay, I said instead. For approximately 18 hours in the Central Transit Zone, we will have no contact with Border Authority Command. Okay. During that period, if there is an incident, we handle it ourselves. He said it the way you'd say we turn left at the junction. A procedural note. A thing that had been incorporated into his understanding of the situation and set aside. I watched him for 3 full seconds. My scent processing was picking up nothing from him, no elevated stress markers, no fear-adjacent compounds, none of the biological signatures that every other species I had ever escorted through the corridor had emitted when I delivered that particular piece of information. The partition accord observers I had escorted 6 cycles ago had produced so much fear compound on that line that I'd had to recalibrate my sensors. Reeves was drinking his second approximated coffee. You have done this before, I said. Isolated transit. No support. Few times. Where? He thought about it for a moment. Not evasively, he seemed to be genuinely sorting through a list, deciding what was relevant. Hadley's Belt. The Southern Run. Once on a mission I'm not supposed to talk about, but the geography was roughly similar. He paused. And once because my navigator made a navigational error that I will not describe further because she's a friend and she knows what she did. I noted, Reeves has a navigator with whom he maintains positive social relationship despite operational failure. Filed under Human Social Bonding Patterns, cross-reference with anomalous loyalty data. I had a lot of cross-reference notes. My log was becoming unwieldy. The shuttle undocked. The corridor opened ahead of us on the forward display, 6 light days of sensor-mapped transit lane rendered in the authority's standard blue-gray palette, with the debris fields marked in amber and the contested zones marked in red. There was more red than I remembered from my last transit. The suspended hostility had been getting less suspended. Reeves looked at the display for a moment. That's a lot of red, he said. Yes. More than the briefing showed. The briefing data was current as of 12 cycles ago. The situation has, I paused. Developed. He nodded. Set down his cup. Looked at the display for another moment with that same unhurried attention, the kind of focus that was not anxious but was very, very present, the way a mind organizes incoming information not because it is alarmed but because it is deciding what to do with it. Then, he leaned back in the restraint station, closed his eyes, and appeared to go to sleep. I sat across from him for a long time. His breathing evened out within 2 minutes. His body relaxed in stages, shoulders first, then the particular tension around the jaw that I had learned most humans carried without knowing it, then the hands, which uncurled from the mug end, rested open on his knees. He was genuinely asleep. Not feigning rest. Not running combat review protocols behind closed eyes. Asleep. We were 6 hours from the first amber zone. I dictated into my log, Reeves sleeping. Corridor approach underway. No anomalous readings. Equipment substitution still unresolved. I paused. The Mark 7's wrist coupling seal issue. I will check the technical register when we arrive. He may be correct. I checked it 4 hours later. He was correct. There had been 7 failure reports on the Mark 7 left wrist coupling in the past 3 cycles. The modification bulletin was in the 3rd tier technical archive, which was not linked to the mission manifest system, which was how it had been missed. I did not wake him to tell him this. I sat with the information for a while and looked at the amber zone on the display and thought about what else might be in 3rd tier archives that the briefing had missed. He woke up 90 minutes before we reached the first debris field. Not because of an alarm, not because I spoke, he simply stopped sleeping, the way certain organisms I had studied shifted from dormancy to activity, a clean transition rather than a gradual emergence. His eyes opened. He looked at the display. He looked at me. "We close," he said. His voice had the slightly roughened quality of recent sleep but was otherwise completely functional. 83 minutes to the HFY debris boundary, I said. He nodded. Reached into the duffel without looking and produced something, another foil packet, different from the first, this one with markings I did not recognize. He opened it, looked at the contents, appeared to evaluate them, and began eating. "What is that?" I asked. I was asking because of the smell, which was extraordinary. Sharp. Chemically aggressive. My secondary olfactory sensors were registering something in the capsaicinoid compound range, which meant dried peppers, he said. Chili variety. Want some? The capsaicinoid content of what he was casually eating, according to my tertiary food chemistry database, was sufficient to trigger a pain response in 11 of the 14 species currently registered with the Vet Border Authority. In southern physiology specifically, ingestion of anything above a mild capsaicinoid concentration caused a cascade reaction that, in documented cases, had resulted in hospitalization. He was eating them like seeds. "No," I said. "Fair enough." He chewed. Looked at the display. The debris field, the amber zone, what's the actual density? The briefing said low, but the briefing said moderate, I said. I read low. I pulled up the briefing document. Checked the relevant section. It said low. I pulled up my own transit record from 2 cycles prior. My record said moderate. The field had expanded. The briefing had not been updated. Reeves watched me figure this out. He didn't say "I told you so" or make any expression that communicated satisfaction. He simply waited while I reached the conclusion and then said, "Okay, so we've got a moderate debris field on outdated charts. Do we have a current sensor sweep?" The shuttle's sensors are, I checked. Short range. Within 17,000 kilometers. So we go slow and watch. That will add time to the transit. Better than not arriving. He looked at the display again. There was something in the way he engaged with problems, not alarm, not the recursive reassessment loop that most species fell into when variables shifted adversely, but something more like recalibration. As though the new information was simply the new map and the question was only what to do with it. "Can you fly this thing, or do I need to get in the seat?" "I am qualified to operate the shuttle," I said. "Good. You fly, I'll watch the sensors." 2 sets of eyes. I noted, in my log, that he had said 2 sets of eyes without appearing to register that I had 4 eyes and that the phrase was therefore either a translation artifact or a human idiom that had been adopted so thoroughly he no longer thought about its origin. I also noted, separately, that he had immediately and, without discussion, organized us into a functional 2-person crew for navigating a moderately dense debris field on outdated charts, assigning roles based on the most efficient use of our respective positions. He had been awake for less than 4 minutes. The HFY field took us 6 hours to cross. It should have taken 2. The debris was old partition-era hull fragments and drive components, some of them still faintly radioactive, distributed in a pattern that the original survey had mapped as sparse regular and that was currently dense irregular in a way that suggested a gravitational perturbation event sometime in the past cycle. The shuttle's hull registered 43 microsphere contacts in the first hour alone. 43. The rating threshold for hull integrity concern was 50 over the full transit. Reeves ran the sensors. He had learned the interface in approximately 9 minutes, which was 4 minutes faster than the training protocol estimated for new operators, and he had then proceeded to modify the display overlay so that incoming fragment trajectories were rendered in a color gradient that prioritized collision probability. The modification was not in the shuttle's interface library. He had done it from first principles. There, he said, 17 times. And I adjusted course 17 times. He never sounded strained. He had the quality, and I am not certain I can adequately describe this, of someone doing a task that was difficult and was aware that it was difficult but had decided that difficulty was not a relevant category of information for the current situation. It was not calm, exactly. It was something adjacent to calm but more active. More deliberate. At hour 4, a fragment cluster that my sensors had not yet resolved appeared on his modified display as a probability spike. Hard right, he said. I had already seen it. I was processing the evasion calculation. Hard right, he said again, with exactly the same tone but slightly more quickly. I executed the maneuver. The fragment cluster passed 40 meters off the port side. One piece struck a glancing contact with the hull, not a penetrating impact, but enough to register a vibration through the deck that I felt in my secondary leg joints. The light above the cargo hold flickered. The duffel shifted. Reeves caught it with one hand, without looking, and held it in place until the vibration stopped. Then, he went back to the sensor display. Mark 5 holding, he said. It took me a moment to understand what he was asking. Hull integrity nominal, I said. No seal compromise. Good. He rolled his shoulder. The Mark 7 would have flagged a wrist seal alert right now. Proximity impact sometimes triggers the coupling actuator, I said. Yes. I read the report. He glanced at me sidelong. Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but in the territory of one. You looked it up. It was relevant data. Sure. We did not speak for another 40 minutes. The fragment density decreased as we approached the field's far boundary. The sensor display showed cleaner space ahead. The red zones were still there, larger than they should have been, but for the moment we were through the amber. I dictated into my log, Shavar field transit complete. Hull integrity nominal. Operative Reeves demonstrated non-standard but effective sensor interface modification and sustained precise tracking over 6-hour period. No stress indicators detected throughout. I paused. Correction, one stress indicator. During the fragment cluster event, Reeves's breathing changed, not elevated, but rhythm shifted. Controlled suppression. He was managing it, not absent of it. I had not noticed the difference until I replayed the audio from my log. He had managed it so well I had thought he was not experiencing it at all. I sat with that for a while as the corridor opened up around us and the red zones drew closer and the ship hummed its standard indifferent hum, and Reeves ate another foil packet, a different one this time, something that smelled of salt and grain, and I thought about the distinction between absence of fear and management of fear, and how, in 14 years of transit escort work, I had never previously considered that they might not be the same thing. My log had 112 entries. None of them had a category for this. On day 3, Reeves reorganized the cargo hold. I want to be precise about this, because it sounds like a minor thing and it was not a minor thing. The cargo hold contained 3 sealed survey containers, each weighing approximately 200 kilograms, each secured to the deck by magnetic restraint clamps that, according to the shuttle's load specifications, required a mechanical assist unit to move safely. The clamps were rated to a release torque that fell outside the operational range of unassisted biological effort for most species in the authority's registry. I discovered what he was doing because I went to the hold to perform a routine integrity check on the containers and found that 2 of them had been moved approximately 4 meters from their original positions and were being resecured by Reeves, who was crouched over the 3rd clamp housing with a multi-tool and an expression of focused mild displeasure. "What are you doing?" I said. "Center of mass was off," he said, without looking up. If we take another impact like the cluster yesterday, the port container walks into the fuel line junction. I moved them. I looked at the containers. I looked at the deck scoring where they had been dragged. I looked at the clamps, which had been released, moved, and were now being reseated, and I thought about the release torque specification, and then I did not think about the release torque specification, because I found that thinking about it was producing a response in my tertiary processing that I did not have a clean category for. The mechanical assist unit is in the forward locker, I said. I know. It's faster without it. He seated the clamp, checked it, stood. Also, the arm keeps binding on the second extension. You've got a hydraulic leak somewhere in the sleeve. The mechanical assist unit had been flagged for maintenance 8 cycles ago. I had submitted the request. Maintenance had acknowledged it. I checked my records. The repair had been filed as pending for 6 cycles and, then, at some point, reclassified as low priority and removed from the active queue without my being notified. I was adding this to my complaint log, a separate log from my mission log, which I maintained for precisely this type of institutional failure, when Reeves walked past me toward the forward section of the shuttle, toweling his hands on a cloth that had definitely not come from shuttle supply. We're about 16 hours from the red zone boundary, he said. The suspended hostility thing. You said you've run this lane before. What does suspended actually mean operationally? I walked after him. It means that the Kethmaran Dominion and the Free Southern Collective have both agreed not to initiate offensive action within the corridor transit lanes. The agreement is enforced by who? I paused. By mutual interest in maintaining the transit infrastructure. Reeves sat in the forward cabin and looked at me in a way that communicated, clearly and without words, that mutual interest in maintaining transit infrastructure was not the same as enforcement. Yes, I said. In practice, the deterrent is primarily reputational. So if something goes wrong in there, the response time from Border Authority is a minimum of 11 hours from the nearest relay post. And the last time something went wrong in there was 9 cycles ago. A Kethmaran patrol vessel intercepted a Southern survey ship. I sat across from him. The survey ship was decommissioned. The crew were held for 6 cycles before diplomatic resolution. Held, he said. In a Kethmaran processing facility. I paused. The conditions were described in the incident report as substandard. Reeves looked at the forward display, where the red zones were now clearly defined against the corridor's blue-gray rendering. He had that recalibration quality again, processing, adjusting, filing the new shape of the terrain. What's the shuttle's defensive rating? He asked. It has no defensive rating, I said. This is a civilian transit vessel. Right. Okay. He was quiet for a moment. Then, the survey containers, what's in them? Geological cores from the preliminary assessment of the Cabal system's 3rd planet. Mineral composition data. Anything that would be valuable to the core data suggests significant verite deposits. I watched his face. Yes. Verite. Which the Kethmaran Dominion would be very interested in obtaining before the data reaches Cabal 9 and is formally registered under Veth Authority claim. He exhaled through his nose. Not dramatically, just the small managed release of someone who has confirmed a suspicion they would have preferred to be wrong about. So we're carrying mineral survey data through contested space on a civilian shuttle with no defenses, and the only thing between us and an 11-hour response time is the reputational deterrence of 2 factions that are currently in suspended hostility. That is accurate, I said. The briefing called this a routine transfer. The briefing was. I stopped. Outdated, he said. Yes. He was quiet for long enough that I began composing the next entry in my mission log, which was developing a theme that I found professionally uncomfortable. Then, he said, you have contacts in the corridor? Anyone we can raise once we're in the 18-hour blackout window? There is a Veth Authority observation post at the midpoint of the corridor. It is. I checked. Minimally staffed. 2 personnel. It has relay capability but is not a defense installation. But they know the traffic. They'd know if a Kethmaran patrol was running. In theory. He nodded. Raise them before we lose the relay. Let them know we're coming through and ask for a current traffic report. It was the obvious thing to do. I had not done it. The protocol for routine transfers did not include pre-transit traffic confirmation for civilian lanes. The protocol had been written when the corridor was less red. I raised the observation post. The operator, a junior attaché I did not know, sounding very young and slightly bored, confirmed that there was currently one Kethmaran patrol vessel operating in the central corridor zone. It was logged as a maintenance and inspection patrol, which was a designation that the Kethmaran Dominion used for vessels that were technically within the terms of the suspended hostility agreement while operating in ways that were very close to the edge of it. The patrol vessel was on a course that would intersect our transit lane in approximately 22 hours. There it is, Reeves said. We could turn back, I said. He looked at me. Could we? I thought about it. The Verite data. Caval 9 waiting. The formal registration deadline for Veth Authority claim, which I had not previously considered to be relevant and, which now, under the new information architecture of this mission, became suddenly very relevant. If the data did not reach Caval 9 before the registration window closed, and the window closed in 9 days, the claim lapsed. The Kethmaran Dominion would then be free to register their own survey. The Suban Collective would dispute it. The suspended hostility would find new reasons to unsuspend. No, I said. We cannot turn back. Then, we go forward. He picked up the thermos from beside his seat, the dented one, which I had noticed he never seemed to empty, refilling it from shuttle supply at irregular intervals, and drank from it. What speed can we make and still run quiet? Lowest emissions profile? At reduced drive output, our sensor signature would decrease by enough that a passive scan wouldn't flag us as a survey shuttle? Possibly. If they weren't looking closely. They'll be looking for a standard transit vessel moving at standard speed on the expected lane. He was quiet for a moment, looking at the display. We don't go on the expected lane. The alternative routes add transit time. Add how much? 14 hours, if we use the Navarre secondary lane. It runs closer to the debris fields but avoids the central zone. So we add 14 hours, run the secondary lane at reduced drive output, and miss the patrol. The Navarre lane is not cleared for civilian transit, I said. Is it prohibited? It is, no. Not prohibited. Uncertified. Okay. He drank again from the thermos. So it's a bureaucratic gap, not a regulation. The distinction is, if it keeps us out of that patrol vessel's path, the distinction is the thing that gets the survey data to Caval 9 without an incident. He looked at me steadily. Your call. You're the escort officer. He said your call and meant it. Not as deflection, he had already made a plan, had already reasoned through to his preferred course, and had handed it to me intact and was prepared to execute whatever I decided. He was not managing me. He was genuinely offering. I had been escort officer on 23 transit assignments. I had never had a charge offer me the decision architecture of a course change in contested space. They either panicked and demanded we turn back, or they deferred entirely and waited for me to solve it. We take the Navarre lane, I said. He nodded and stood. I'll go recalculate the cargo restraints for the new route. He went back to the hold. I sat at the console and updated the course, and then I dictated into my log, revised course to Navarre secondary lane to avoid Kethmaran patrol contact. Operative Reeves proposed course modification after independent analysis of traffic data and corridor geometry. Analysis was correct. Execution assigned to escort officer. I paused. The assignment of decision authority felt deliberate. Unsure of purpose. Cross-reference with I stopped. Deleted the cross-reference note. Started over. Reeves handed me the decision. He knew what the right answer was. He gave me the credit anyway. I have not previously encountered this in a charge. Filing under no applicable category. The Navarre lane was technically not a lane at all. It was more accurately described as the gap between two lanes, a strip of uncertified transit space that ran along the inner edge of the corridor's contested zone, threading between the eastern debris field and the Kethmaran patrol boundary like a seam on a garment that the original surveyor had stitched closed and, then, never thought to open. It was also, it turned out, not empty. We found the Southern ship 4 hours into the Navarre transit. It was not moving. It was broadcasting a standard distress signal on a frequency that was technically within our receiver range, but that was also technically the frequency that civilian shuttles were not expected to monitor. I knew about the frequency the way I knew about a lot of third-tier data from reading documents that were not in my job description and that my supervisor had once told me I spent too much time on. "You're hearing something," Reeves said. He was watching me. He had been watching me with the same quality of attention that he brought to the sensor display present, unedged, just open. I had noticed, over 2.5 days, that Reeves watched the people he was with the way he watched his instruments, not to judge them, just to have accurate information. "Distress signal," I said. "On the Southern emergency band. From a vessel on the lane. Approximately 11,000 kilometers ahead." He was already moving toward the sensor station. I pulled up what we had limited at this range, but enough to see a ship-shaped mass sitting very still in a corridor where ships were not supposed to be still. "Is it the survey ship?" he said. "The one from 9 cycles ago?" I checked the registry. "No. The registry signature is it's a Southern Scout class, light configuration. Recent build. Recent build. Sitting disabled in an uncertified lane." He looked at the display. "Either they had a mechanical failure and got pushed off course, or they are using the Navarre lane for the same reason we are," I said. "And they had a mechanical failure. And they're broadcasting distress on a frequency that civilian transits won't hear, which means they were hoping for a Veth Authority vessel." We looked at each other. The Southern Collective and the Veth Authority had a functional if not warm diplomatic relationship. Assisting a Southern vessel in distress was within the scope of Veth Authority protocol. It was also, given the location of the nearest Kethmaran patrol, a potentially complicated act to explain. "We stop," Reeves said. "The protocols don't apply to an uncertified lane." He said it without inflection, the same way he'd said it's a bureaucratic gap, not a regulation. "Distress signal, disabled vessel, crew potentially at risk. We stop. The Kethmaran patrol will detect our approach if we decelerate and hold position at this distance. How long do we have before the patrol comes into passive sensor range of this area?" I calculated. 7 hours. Approximately. "How long to render enough assistance to let them get underway again?" "That depends entirely on the nature of the failure." He was already standing up. "Then, we'd better find out fast." I watched him pull on his suit jacket, not the suit itself, just the jacket, a worn thing with patches at the elbows that appeared to be a different material than the original, and I thought about the Southern survey crew from 9 cycles ago, held in a Kethmaran processing facility for 6 cycles under substandard conditions, and I thought about the Southern crew on the disabled vessel ahead of us, broadcasting on a frequency they were hoping a Veth Authority ship would hear, and I thought about Reeves standing at the sensor station with his dented thermos and his foil packets, who had looked at the situation and said we stop as though the rest of the analysis risk, exposure, patrol proximity, mission timeline was available and had been considered and had simply not changed the answer. I opened a channel to the Southern vessel. The response came in 11 seconds. A voice, young, controlled but pressured, the vocal signature of someone maintaining composure through considerable effort. "Veth Authority vessel, this is Scout Prana 7, Southern Collective Registry. We have a drive motivator failure and a partial crew injury. We cannot reach transit speed. Please advise." Reeves leaned past me to the calm Scout Prana 7, "This is Escort Shuttle Terran 6. What's the injury?" A pause. "One crew member, pressure suit seal failure during emergency repair attempt. Exposure approximately 4 minutes. He is currently stable but he's going to need the med kit," Reeves said to me. Then, into the calm, "We're coming alongside. Don't suit up for exterior contact, we'll dock at your emergency collar." Another pause. Your shuttle, are you equipped for? We'll make it work, Reeves said. What's your drive configuration? The voice listed components. Reeves listened with his head slightly tilted, the way he always listened to technical information, absorbing it rather than processing it in sequence, holding it until a shape formed. It's the motivator sequencer, he said to me. You're familiar with sub-in drive architecture? I've done a Hadley's belt salvage run on a sub-in mid-class freighter. He was moving toward the equipment locker. The sequencer's modular. If theirs isn't damaged, just unseated, I can. He stopped. Do we have a drive access tool set? I checked the locker. We had a standard shuttle maintenance kit. Some of it, I said. That'll do. He had the med kit under his arm. He picked up the toolkit with his other hand. He looked perfectly prepared for this situation, the suit jacket with its patched elbows, the worn thermos still clipped to his belt, the weight of 2 tasks in each hand. We had 6 hours and 40 minutes before the Kethmaran patrol came into range. I started the docking approach. The crew of Scout Prana 7 were 3 sub-in, a species I knew primarily from the briefing documents and from the incident report about the survey crew, tall and narrow-built with bioluminescent tendrils that served, as I understood it, both sensory and communicative functions. When the emergency collar connected and Reeves pulled through, the tendrils on all 3 of them flared simultaneously in the pale green-white color that I recognized from my reading as a distress-adjacent response, not panic, but its precursor. He was not what they had expected from a Veth Authority vessel. I watched through the collar camera as he set down the med kit and the toolkit and looked at the 3 of them with the same steady, unhurried assessment he used for sensor data and debris fields and the contents of foil packets. Which one needs the kit, he said. After a moment, one of the sub-in gestured toward the aft section. Reeves picked up the med kit and followed without further discussion. The remaining 2 sub-in watched him go. Their tendrils had shifted to a different color, something in the amber gold range. I did not have a reference for that color in my files. The one closest to the collar, the pilot, I thought, from the position markings on her suit, looked toward me through the camera. Is he your crew? She said. Her standard was accented but precise. He is my charge, I said. Her tendrils did something complex. He does not behave as a charge. I thought about how to answer that. No, I said. He does not. From the aft section came the sound of the med kit opening, and then Reeves's voice, low and practical, asking questions I couldn't quite hear, and then the sound of someone responding, relieved, I thought. The vocal signature of someone who has been afraid and has just been given a reason to revise that estimate. I opened my mission log. Scout Prana 7 assist. Sub-in crew, 3. Injured, 1. Reeves proceeding with medical assistance and drive assessment. I paused. The sub-in pilot noted that he does not behave as a charge. Filed under, no applicable category. Another pause. I have 17 entries under that category now. I was beginning to suspect the category was not a gap in my filing system. It was a description. The drive sequencer took Reeves 41 minutes. He had to fabricate one of the alignment pins from shuttle spare stock, a process that involved a tool I had not known was in the maintenance kit used in a way that I was fairly certain was not in the toolkit's operating manual. The sub-in engineer watched him do it with tendrils that had gone very still and a quality of attention that I recognized, because I had been wearing the same expression for 2.5 days. The injured sub-in crew member, a young male, which I gathered from the sub-in's honorifics, had a pressure exposure injury that was, according to my medical database, serious but survivable with proper treatment. Reeves had stabilized him and was talking to him when I checked the collar camera, not in the way a medic talks to a patient but in the way someone talks to a person who is frightened and needs something to focus on that isn't fear. I could not hear what he was saying. I watched the young crew member's tendrils, which had started in the dark blue-gray of documented distress and had, over the course of 20 minutes, shifted toward something in the amber gold range. The same color the pilot had shown when Reeves walked away to help. I did not look that color up. I was becoming cautious about what I would find. At 4 hours and 12 minutes before the Kethmaran patrol range, Scout Prana 7's drive motivator lit up on my sensors. A small, functional bloom of energy, a ship not dead anymore. Terran 6, this is Prana 7. Drive is nominal. We can make transit speed. Go, I said. Take the Navar lane to exit and, then, a direct vector for southern space. Don't use the main corridor. The patrol is, we know about the patrol, the pilot said. That's why we're here. Then, go now. A pause. Longer than it needed to be for a navigational acknowledgement. The human, she said. What is his name? I looked at Reeves, who was coming back through the collar with the empty med kit and the toolkit and the dented thermos, which had somehow survived 2.5 days inactive shuttle operations and 1 emergency repair and was still clipped to his belt, still apparently containing something, still in use. Reeves, I said. Tell him we will remember. I relayed it. Reeves looked at the camera. They don't need to, he said. The collar disengaged. Prana 7 pulled away on my display, accelerating toward transit speed, tendrils of drive exhaust spreading into the corridor dark like something alive. Gone in under 4 minutes. Reeves sat down, drank from the thermos, and looked at the display. Clock, he said. 4 hours, 9 minutes to patrol range. Okay. He set the thermos down. We need to be moving. We were already moving. I had adjusted course the moment the collar cleared. He noticed. Looked at me. The skeptical inquiry eyebrow was doing something I had not previously observed, a slight softening at the outer edge, a quality I did not have a name for in any species vocabulary I knew. I looked at my mission log. 17 entries under no applicable category. I added an 18th. Reeves did not ask for acknowledgement. Did not note the risk. Did not log the decision. Pause. He helped because they needed help. That was the entire analysis. I have been escort officer for 14 years. I have never met anyone for whom that was the entire analysis. I am beginning to think I have been misunderstanding a very important thing for a very long time. The Kathmaran patrol vessel found us 3 hours and 40 minutes later. Not at the edge of its sensor range. Not on approach. It came out of a lateral position relative to our lane that my navigation charts had designated as inactive debris field and, that was, very clearly, not an active debris field. It had been waiting. Parked in a sensor shadow formed by a dense concentration of partition-era hull material and running on passive-only systems, which meant we had zero warning between it being not on our display and it being on our display, 2,000 kilometers off our port side, and hailing us. The hail was not polite. I had been to Kathmaran space twice during border negotiations that preceded the accord. I knew their hailing protocols. The standard civilian intercept began with a vessel identifier request and a transit authorization inquiry. What came through our comm was neither of those things. It was a direct order, rendered in Kathmaran standard, a dialect that my translator processed about 70% accurately, to reduce speed, submit to inspection, and prepare the cargo manifest. The word it used for prepare had a second meaning that the translator flagged as surrender. Reeves heard it. He was at the sensor station, where he had been almost continuously for the past several hours, and he heard it, and his posture did not change in any visible way, and his breathing did not change, and he just looked at the Kathmaran vessel on the display and was very still for a moment. Options, he said. Not to me, or rather, not exclusively to me. He was thinking aloud. I had learned that about him. When the problem was hard enough, he externalized the reasoning, not because he needed an audience but because language made the variables concrete. We comply, I said. We present the manifest. The survey data is sealed and logged under VETH Authority Diplomatic Registry, which technically means they can't open the containers without triggering an incident. Yes. But they can hold us here until the registration window closes. The word technically was doing a great deal of work in that exchange, and neither of us had much faith in it. We have our diplomatic registry, I said. The Kathmaran Dominion is a signatory to the accord that's currently in suspended hostility. The comm crackled again. The patrol vessel was adjusting its position, not aggressively, but deliberately, the kind of repositioning that a vessel does when it is establishing an intercept angle. The Kathmaran's running lights were on full spectrum, which was, in their communication conventions, a dominance signal. I knew this from the negotiation briefings. I had hoped I would not need to know it in a practical context. "Can we run?" Reeves asked. "Their drive class significantly outperforms ours at tactical range." "Not asking if we can outrun them. Asking if we can run long enough to make the distance to Cabal 9 worth their while to pursue." I looked at the geometry. The patrol vessel's fuel load for a maintenance and inspection patrol would not have been provisioned for extended pursuit. If we ran and they followed and we could sustain enough of a lead for long enough if we gain initial distance in the debris field, I said. The eastern boundary is 1,400 kilometers ahead of our current position. Their drive class has a maneuverability limitation in dense debris environments. Because of the drive vanes. I paused. You know their drive configuration. Kathmaran Patrol Class, mid-generation build. The vane geometry gives them power, but it means they have to spool down drive output in high debris environments to prevent harmonic fracture in the vane housing. He was already reconfiguring the course display. The Mark 7 drive limitation problem, basically, but for whole ships. I stared at him. My navigator. The one who knows what she did. He glanced at me. We had a situation in the outer rim. Different patrol, same configuration. I learned their specs. You retain that information from its useful information. He had finished the course recalculation. If we punch for the debris field entrance at full drive output, we hit the boundary in 11 minutes. They'll follow. In the field, we have maneuverability advantage. This shuttle is small, low mass, short cycle drive. They're bigger and stiffer. We navigate through the field and come off the far side, and we're on the Cabal approach vector, and we are very much not stopping for an inspection. I looked at the recalculated course. Then, at the patrol vessel's position. Then, at the debris field boundary. The field density at this entry point is classified as moderate heavy. I know. I've been watching the sensor return for the last hour. He was completely calm. The managed calm, the one I now knew was not the absence of something but the active containment of it, the breathing that didn't quite stay even, the slight change in rhythm that he controlled so precisely that it was almost invisible. Almost. It's manageable. For the sensors, yes. The hull contacts will be higher than Shavar. Yeah. He pulled up the modified sensor overlay he'd built 2 days ago, checked it, adjusted 2 parameters. I'll run the display. You fly. The comm crackled again. The patrol vessel was requesting a response. The translator flagged the tone as escalated. I looked at Reeves. He looked back at me. Your call, he said. Again. The same clean transfer of decision authority he'd offered in the Navarre conversation. He had the course plotted, the analysis done, the plan ready, and he was handing me the controls. The Kathmaran vessel was repositioning for intercept. I pushed to full drive output. 11 minutes is a long time when a patrol vessel is accelerating off your port quarter. The Kathmaran ship was fast. I had known it was fast from the class specifications, but knowing a thing and watching it close on your display at a rate that kept revising your arrival at boundary estimate downward were two different experiences. We were at 10 minutes when they started to narrow the gap. 8 minutes when they hailed again, this time without the diplomatic preamble, just a direct command, translated by my system as stop with a small footnote that the original Kathmaran phrasing carried connotations of absolute authority. Reeves did not look at the display while they were closing. He was building the entry line for the debris field, the optimal angle for a low-mass shuttle to enter dense moderate debris at full drive, which was not a standard navigational calculation and which required, as far as I could tell, a combination of the field density mapping I had done during Shavar transit and a set of assumptions about debris distribution curves that I could not immediately reconstruct from his display inputs. You're calculating an entry line, I said. Yeah. Based on what source data? HFY transit. The field was initially mapped as sparse regular and it was dense irregular. Same survey team mapped this one. Same era. Same instruments. I looked at the density display. You're assuming the map underestimates density at entry by the same margin as HFY. By approximately the same margin. So we don't go in at the charted entry and hit something the chart doesn't know is there. We go in 200 kilometers north of the charted entry where the debris was pushed by the same gravitational event that expanded HFY, which means it's denser there, but it's regular dense instead of irregular dense, which is actually safer if you know what you're doing. I processed this. You've been developing this analysis for how long? Since you told me the same team surveyed both fields. He glanced at the gap on the display. 6 hours ago. The patrol vessel was at approximately 900 kilometers. I could see it on the long-range optical now, a Kethmaran Hunter class in the standard matte gray-black finish that they used for patrol operations, running lights fully deployed, drive output matching ours and, then, some. It was built like something that expected to end chases rather than run them. 200 kilometers north, I said, and adjusted course. The debris field appeared on the optical sensors first as a thickening of the background the partition-era material caught and scattered the corridor's ambient light in a way that looked, from the right angle, like a smear of old luminescence against the void. Then, the long range swept the field boundary and the sensor display populated with mass return data, and Reeves was already adjusting the overlay, already reading the density gradient, already building the next 7 seconds of course in his head. Entry in 42 seconds, I said. The patrol vessel was at 600 kilometers and still closing. They're going to follow us in, I said. I know. The vein limitation, the harmonic fracture risk, they may calculate the chase as not worth, they want the survey data. His voice was level. They'll follow. They would follow. I knew it. The Verite claim was worth more than a patrol vessel's risk assessment. Whoever was commanding that ship had specific orders and specific objectives, and we were carrying one of them through a debris field at full drive output. Reeves, I said. If the density is higher than your estimate, then we adapt. He was watching the display. 30 seconds. The hull started picking up trace microcontacts. Not the solid register of actual fragment impacts, just the outermost particles, the dust margin of the field, brushing the shuttle's forward sensors like a warning. 20 seconds. The patrol vessel hit the trace margin behind us. Their drive output spiked on my sensor return as they pushed to match our entry angle, which was not the charted entry angle, which meant their systems were probably flagging an anomalous approach and their pilot was probably overriding it. 10 seconds. Entry, I said, and then we were inside. The HFY field had been bad. This was different. This was not worse, exactly. Reeves had been right about the density being regular rather than chaotic, but it was more present. The debris here was heavier material, structural frame sections, drive housing components, the kind of wreckage that had mass and trajectory and needed to be watched and not just avoided. The sensor display was a steady cascade of returns, each one needing assessment, and Reeves was reading them the way I had watched him read them at HFY, but faster, the call and response of it finding a rhythm that had nothing to do with standard shuttle operations protocols and everything to do with two people who had spent 3 days learning how the other worked. Left 2 degrees. I adjusted. Hold. I held. Down 4. Hard. I pushed the shuttle into a drop vector that the structural tolerance specifications technically rated as inadvisable, and a piece of frame material that had been traveling toward us for approximately 4,000 years passed above the viewport close enough that I would later describe it as close enough to see the texture of the weld seams. I did not describe it that way at the time. At the time I was recalculating our vector and watching the patrol vessel on the aft sensors. They had entered the field. Their drive output was reduced, the vein limitation, exactly as Reeves had said, but they had entered. Committed. The Hunter class was threading the field on the charted entry line, which was the wrong line, which meant they were encountering the same irregular density that had made the charted entry line wrong, and the sensor return of their hull was showing impacts at a rate that was making the harmonic resonance in their drive vein system very much a present concern rather than a theoretical one. They're slowing down, I said. Reeves didn't respond. He was watching a cluster of debris ahead, sorting the returns by mass and velocity with the modified overlay, and, when I looked at his face, there was something there that was not quite what I had seen at Shavar, less managed calm and, more something else, something I was struggling to file. The eyebrow with the wrong scar was doing a thing I had not seen it do before. The outer edge had pulled down slightly. Not concern. Not stress. Something focused to the point where the focus had become the whole face. The cluster, I said. I see it. We need right, then drop, then right again. Follow the gap. It's there, you see the gap? I saw it. Barely. A corridor between a drive housing fragment rotating at roughly a quarter cycle per second and a collection of smaller material that was orbiting it, as if the larger piece had gathered its own small gravity well over the centuries. The gap was wide enough for us. Barely. I see it. Go. I went. The drive housing fragment was still rotating as we passed through its orbital shadow, and I watched it on the port camera, a piece of a ship's heart, from a war I had been a junior scholar during, still turning in the dark, still following the same arc it had been following since the partition engagement ended, and everything it had been part of became material for gravity to organize into new patterns. Then, we were through. The debris field thinned over the next 3 minutes to trace density and, then, to open corridor, and, Cavil 9 was on the forward display, a navigation beacon bright in the distance. The patrol vessel was still in the field. I watched it on the aft sensor. It had slowed significantly. The drive output signature was irregular, not the smooth power curve of a ship in controlled deceleration but the uneven pulse of a drive system under stress. The harmonic fracture risk. I watched the signature for another 40 seconds, and then, the patrol vessel stopped closing distance entirely and began, very slowly, to reverse course. They were exiting the field. They were not following us. I pulled up the tactical display one more time and confirmed it and then sat back in the pilot's seat and did something that I had not done since the early portions of my career as an attaché, which was nothing. Just sat. Just let the moment exist without immediately filing it, categorizing it, adding it to the log. The shuttle hummed. The Cavil 9 beacon blinked. The debris field receded on the aft sensor. Reeves was looking at the forward display. The Cavil 9 approach vector was clear. Standard transit, no anomalies, nothing between us and the outpost but open corridor and the passage of the next several hours. He exhaled. The controlled breath release, the managed one, but longer this time. Deeper. The kind of exhale that accounts for time. Good flying, he said. I looked at the display. I thought about saying you built the course. I thought about saying your analysis made the field navigable. I thought about saying you have spent 3 days being right about things that the briefing was wrong about and adapting to what the briefing missed and making decisions that no mission profile I have ever run has prepared me for. You knew they'd follow, I said instead. Before we entered the field. You knew they would follow and you told me to fly anyway. They had orders, he said. People with orders follow. And if the density had been higher than your estimate. If the gap hadn't been there. He was quiet for a moment. Then, we'd have found another gap. And, if there wasn't one. He turned and looked at me. The skeptical inquiry eyebrow and the scar and the worn suit jacket and the dented thermos and the 3 days of accumulated foil packets and the side pocket of the duffel that he apparently considered an adequate trash management system. There's always a gap, he said. You just have to be willing to look for it while things are coming at you. I opened my mission log. Cavil 9 approach underway. Kethmaran patrol deterred. Survey data intact. I paused for a long time. Reeves said, there is always a gap. You just have to be willing to look for it while things are coming at you. Another pause. I have been noting throughout this mission that I cannot find a category for Reeves. I think I have been looking for the wrong thing. The category is not a species classification or a threat assessment or a capability rating. The category is a kind of orientation. A way of facing the incoming. Pause. I do not have a word for it. I have been looking in my vocabulary for 3 days and it is not there. The Caval 9 beacon grew brighter on the display. 3 hours to the outpost. I made one more entry, ask him. Tomorrow. Before we dock. Ask him what that is. What you call the thing that means you don't look away when the debris is incoming and you trust that the gap exists before you can see it. He will probably shrug. I will file whatever he says under a new category. I will name the category after this mission. That seems correct.